Everyone, we come here heavy-hearted
Mm-hmm.
to this recording today. Our good friend, brother, and spouse, Noah. All three of those for all three of us.
Uh-huh.
We were all
Well, not quite.
married siblings and friends to
That's
Noah.
weird. I don't know that I like this bit.
Our dear companion.
Last episode, Noah could not join us, as we said, because they had the shits.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they never stopped until it was too late.
R.I.P.
Noah is with us no longer. Noah's funeral is it will already have
Yeah,
happened
by the time this
when
podcast
this
is
episode
out.
when it comes out, it already happened, so don't worry about it. But if you want to send your respects, you can send $200 cash in an unmarked envelope underneath your nearest bus station bench.
200's a minimum. You can give
family-
more if you want to.
You can give more. You can absolutely
And
can
you
give
should.
more. But if you put it there, the family will receive it.
Yes.
We're checking all of
and,
them.
And we all do want to say thank you for your contributions. We really appreciate it in these difficult times. Nina, I understand you prepared a poem.
I did. I have it here on this sheet of paper. It says, "What is the gender-neutral term for a widow?" Thank you.
Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Jeff, was there anything you wanted to say?
No, I don't think so.
What is there to say?
Okay, yeah. I mean, we're probably fine. We can just keep, going through this episode,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a difficult time for everyone, but there's no reason for us to, uproot our lives over it. The podcast will proceed as scheduled.
I think I would feel better personally if we talked about a movie about stalking.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially
I think that would make me feel more
since
comfortable.
I'm at home alone with no husband. It was a really fun movie to watch. Being
Right.
home alone with no husband. There was no problems there at all.
Well, we don't have to talk about it right now, but did anybody else see any other movies recently that they maybe want to talk about?
Yes, I did.
Very briefly.
I have a ghoul I'd love to gab. I saw 3 movies. I've seen a lot of movies.
Oh, wow.
If there are movies that we have all seen, we can talk about those together, I suppose. But I saw the Barbie movie, I saw Oppenheimer,
Hell yeah.
and I saw
Yep.
Talk to Me. The only
Haven't seen that one.
pure ghoul is Talk to Me. That's a
course.
straight up horror movie. It's an A24 movie, Australian, so foreign film.
Cool.
It's in theaters now. It's pretty new. I don't know what possessed us to see it in theaters that early.
That was like opening night, too.
Yeah. It was really good. I really liked it.
Nice.
It's only grown on me since we watched it. It's very Noah described it as A24 does Blumhouse, and I think that's a very accurate way of describing it. All of the trailers, I was like, this is A24. This literally looks like Truth or Dare or some shit. But
That was how the
it was-
trailers looked, yeah.
yeah, but it was it was really well done. The message was pretty spot on. Twitter Brandon had a massive L take on it. Twitter Brandon was like,
no.
they did colorblind casting, but I think they should have thought it through more because it was detrimental to the message about drugs because it played into racial stereotypes. Brandon, that's the point of the movie. It wasn't colorblind casting. Having the black characters be the ones who were most victimized by the drug allegory is purposeful because that's how it happens in real life. So it really
Twitter Brandon would really take a movie about a bunch of people in Africa being warrior kings and being like, they really did colorblind casting, but I think if they had more white people in lead roles,
it was genuinely
it would have made more sense.
It was genuinely baffling because there are scenes where it's an integrated family, it's a found family, where one of the characters is kind of going through the main character is going through a rough time in her life, and she's kind of integrated into she's Black, and she's kind of integrated into this white family who are kind of caring for her. And when one of the members of the white family starts getting kind of victimized by the main antagonistic force, everyone is immediately suspicious of this kind of adopted like Black character. And everyone's like, what did you do? What did you do to him? And it's like, this is on purpose.
That sounds
this
very
is like
pointed.
so very obviously like part of the themes of the movie to me, that I was like, dude, I feel like it went right over your head.
That reminds me of a conversation that I was having with my father-in-law one time about Marvel movies, and he referred to Black Panther as the one that was, quote, all politically correct, you know? And I was just like, buddy, you know, Africa's a place that exists, right?
Africa's real, and Wakanda may be a fictional country in Africa, but
it's set there.
It's set in That's
a
Africa.
Part of what the whole thing is there, actually. Like, that's the point. That's what that sounds like to me.
Speaking of movies where annoying men miss the point, we saw the.
Hey everybody, we realized that after talking about two other movies that came out recently at length, that they're both struck movies and by struck companies, and we shouldn't be talking about them on a podcast because we stand with the striking workers.
Very much do.
And we think writers and actors and everybody should be paid fair wages, and these organizations should stop hoarding all the wealth. So we're cutting all of that.
Sorry.
But sorry. Stand with the workers.
Yeah. But yeah.
So earlier this week, I, for the first time in a long while, rewatched The Burning. I know I've mentioned it on this podcast a few times. This is the movie that Tom Savini decided to work on instead of Friday the 13th Part 2 because, quote, why would Jason be back? He's dead. That's weird. Instead of doing that, he decided to work on The Burning, which is it's a halfway decent camp slasher. It's got great kills, and literally, like, that's the only reason to watch it. It's unfortunately written by the Weinstein brothers, and you can tell the characters are gross, but one of them is played by a young Jason Alexander, also called George Costanza to Seinfeld fans. And tell you what,
I played D&D with his son.
What the fuck?
Noah keeps sending me TikToks from Gabe, and I finally was like, you know who that is, right?
Yeah.
What the hell?
So Gabe, he is George Costanza's son. I played in a charity stream with him,
I could have sworn I told you this already, Jeff.
Another notable person who you probably don't know, but Brizzy Voices is a voice actress, has a few million subscribers on YouTube, and a few other people who are all really cool, and I felt very out of place because I was like, I'm nobody.
That's really cool, though.
But it was a whole lot of fun. It was a great session, and we raised a lot of money.
Wow. Well, in any case, in the movie The Burning, a young Jason Alexander has a full head of hair, which I was unprepared for, and also shows his ass.
Oh, nice.
So, if you're into that, The Burning is on Shudder right now. It's also got just one sequence of a bunch of really cool kills that are shot in this really manga inspired kind of style. I think it looks really cool, but ultimately, is the movie good? No. So I reminded myself of that earlier this week.
Nice. That's fun.
So are we gonna not talk about Blazing Saddles? Or
we can briefly. I only have one thing to say about Blazing Saddles. Okay, I have two things. One, low key, it's a comfort movie for me. I really enjoy Blazing Saddles. It has maybe 3 bits out of an uncountable amount of bits that did not age well at all. Everything else is like, when people are like, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today, I'm like, yeah, you cut 3 scenes and you could. And the other thing is Bart and Jim. Someone in my Discord server, a dear friend of mine, we were talking about Blazing Saddles, and the two like main lead cowboys, their chemistry, I've always thought this is not a revelation to me. Their chemistry is off the chain. Gene Wilder,
They bounce off each other so naturally.
they are so like flirtatious immediately and then in love from that point onward. They ride off into the sunset together. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Like
but-
initially my first thought to that idea is, well, that's kind of just how Gene Wilder is so often,
Of
though, right?
course.
He just has that
But-
kind of charm that drips off him. But at the same
it's
time, he's different
reciprocated
in
in this
Blazing
one.
Saddles. He's different in that one.
yeah,
It's more.
No.
He's sweeter.
Cleveland Little, who plays Bart,
Yeah.
like bounces back. He calls two people babe in the whole movie. He calls Lily, the woman he sleeps with, babe, and then he calls Jim babe as well.
That's
or
true.
baby. And I'm like, that's, to me, that's something. Anyway, there was someone in my server who also shipped it, and so it went from the two of us being like, haha, yeah, we definitely shipped this, to we both rewatched it within the span of 24 hours just because we finally had someone to talk to about it. So yeah, that's why I rewatched Blazing Saddles, just because it's maybe my most obscure men loving men ship ever. But yeah,
Nice.
that was so off topic, but it's not a Struck movie, so I will be saying it.
Welcome back to the Casual Obsession Horror Movie Podcast, the horror movie podcast where we talk about horror movies. I'm your host, Jeff, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Emma
Hi.
and also Nina.
Hello.
Not Noah, because he shit himself to death. This week,
Yes,
we
rest in
watched the
peace.
movie
To death.
Watcher 2022, which is written and directed by Chloe Okuno. This is a movie that is about a... what is she? And she's an actress? Her job really...
actress,
It's about a woman named Julia who moves to Bucharest, Romania with her husband for his job. And while there... doesn't know anybody and doesn't speak the language yet, and is just kind of trying to figure out what her life is supposed to look like there. And while this is happening, she starts to notice a guy looking at her from outside her window.
Yeah.
And that sounds
the
like it could
movie.
be a spoiler, but this is all within the first 15 minutes of the movie. So that is really just the
Yeah,
setup.
for sure. Good stuff.
In terms of critical reception,
Who
what's that?
I was gonna say who watches The Watcher as a joke.
Us?
Hardy
it's-
hard.
yeah,
it's
we're
us, yeah.
we're the ones. We
Yeah, it's
watched
us.
it.
We did it. We watched it.
We did it.
So in terms of critical reception, IMDb, it's averaging a 6.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's got 88%, and a 3.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. And I did actually read a couple of more negative Letterboxd reviews to see what people's problem with it was. And it seems like most people, even actually the most, I didn't go all the way down to like 1-star reviews, right? Because if somebody left a 1-star review, I'm not going to pay attention to that. No offense to people who leave 1-star reviews, but I don't respect you. So I was looking at like some of the 2-star reviews or the more negatively written like 3-star reviews and stuff. And even the most negative reviews of this movie that I read all conceded that it was well made. They were all like, the plot and stuff is, bereft of twists, and it's a very basic thriller and stuff like that. But then they would also be like, the cinematography and the music and stuff is all really good, and the acting's all fantastic. But like, the story's boring or whatever. Like, it seems like most people can't even wholeheartedly criticize this movie.
Oh, so can I read to you something from Twitter Brandon then?
What does Twitter Brandon have to say about this?
Okay, so as a disclaimer and kind of a preamble to my rating, I agree with Brandon on this one.
Okay.
Actually, he says, loved the pacing and look of Chloe Okuno's Watcher, but not much else. Micah Monroe is as great as always, but there's really no there. Too afraid to really go anywhere and sparse almost to a fault. Liked it a lot when Monroe was just wandering the city, otherwise nah. A lot of films lately, particularly this and Last Night in Soho, seem to think that by making the subtext bluntly obvious text, they're somehow reclaiming 70s Euro horror for a more progressive viewer. It ends up sanding down any of the weirdo margins. And I kind of agree. I think it's maybe a symptom of the fact that I had watched Talk to Me the night before, and Talk to Me does a lot of like shock horror.
Hmm.
So something like this that's yes, a little more suspense based and more of a standard thriller horror. Kind of it was good, and there's a lot of nuance that I do want to talk about. I don't think there was nothing there. There was stuff that I picked up on that I'm like, this is going to be interesting to discuss. But I see, especially with the comparison to Last Night in Soho, I see what he's getting at, where it's kind
Yeah.
of like, oh, if we make our themes more obvious, people will maybe overlook the fact that we haven't actually done anything new or interesting.
I get that, but I watched it with my Skinamarink brain, and I don't mind a movie just having a little bit too narrow of a focus sometimes.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it isn't a valid criticism, but I feel like if I don't know, we talked a couple episodes ago about like engaging with movies on their own terms.
Right,
And
exactly.
I
Yeah.
love how focused and especially, I'm going to talk about this later, how mundane so much of this movie is. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's well executed in that specific regard. And I think it's sometimes a cool thing for a movie to do. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I get that though. Yeah.
Not every movie has
Yeah.
to be this big freaky weirdo thing. We can just have some well-made stories. And when it comes to engaging with the movie on its own terms, that's something that I think Brandon is like particularly bad at.
Yeah.
So I do think that like he expected more from this movie that this movie never promised him. So I will say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can have movies that are good where they have a bunch of really complex moving pieces and they're all executed really well and you're like, wow, that was a great horror movie. But then you can also have a great movie where it's just the one piece and it is shine and polished and pristine and just expertly crafted. And you're like, you can still be like, wow, that was
Yeah.
a really good horror movie, even though it's just that one piece,
100%.
you know? And similarly, you can have shitty movies that are just like one piece, or shitty movies that have a ton of moving pieces because they're not done well.
Right.
And so when you have like a good one of either category, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be
There's
like,
different
that
ways
was
for
really
things
good.
to be good. It's not, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you all think about?
Yeah, if we were to
Yeah.
all say put like a numerical value to our enjoyment of
Yeah.
the quality of this movie, what do we all think it would be?
I feel like everyone's waiting for me to say something. So I
I would have said mine right then, but I still haven't landed on a number.
I really enjoyed it. I would love to rewatch this at some point when I haven't just watched a movie that was really high on
Mm.
gore and creep factor and shock factor. So I probably am gonna give this one a 6, maybe a 7.
Okay.
Interesting.
I think that it's me. I think that it's me and not the movie. But I
Yeah,
just
just
I'm the
timing.
drama.
Yeah,
Nina Wolverina 2023.
I just didn't really find anything special or super enjoyable about this movie.
okay.
But like yeah, it was fine. I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah. I am a panada,
Yeah.
or as the Discord server knows me, Eminem panada.
Mhm.
Right.
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
So those of you who listened to the last episode will recall me being like, I watched this before and I really didn't enjoy
Right.
it, and I'm interested in watching it again. I was thinking of a different movie.
Yeah.
So I had not seen this before. I'd heard good things about it, and it was on my list. One day I started to watch it, but it is a very like slow burn movie for
Oh,
most of
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
And when I started to watch it that day, I was like, this is not what I'm looking for right now. And so I never finished it. I only got like a few minutes in.
Understandable.
But this time I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I was enthralled throughout, and everything was really well done, and I had a great time. I'm gonna give it an 8.8.
Yo, all right. I was
Yeah.
thinking of going for an 8.5, and I was worried that was going to be too high of a number for the way that everyone else felt about it. Cool. Because I
No, I had a
yeah,
great time.
I really like this movie. I like how slow of a burn it is, as previously mentioned. I like how mundane a lot of it is. I love all the the intricacies of the color and the lighting and the textures in general, the acting of pretty much everybody that's in it, the music, the like I can't think of anything about this movie that I hate. I don't think it makes any
Yeah.
horrible mistakes. The common criticism of it is that the story is very basic and doesn't have any like twists or turns. It's been called a little bit too predictable. I think the predictability is a strength that it has personally,
Yeah.
because like knowing the kind of movie that it is, the way that you watch it, you kind of expect it to get weird at some point, and I love the way that it doesn't.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what was I gonna say?
No clue.
Ah. Forget
Okay.
everything. My
Yeah, like
brain is
I
empty.
feel a
Keep
little
going.
silly saying that because I feel like I'm doing the the classic annoying Twitter film bro thing where it's like, well, actually, because you expected the movie to be good, it subverted your expectations by not being good, and that makes it good. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
no, though that's not like. It's just I feel like it is
I
legitimately doing something that I wasn't expecting it to do by doing the exact thing that it looks like it's doing. Like.
Yeah. I similarly, not similarly, I just remembered what I was going to say before. Me, Nina's cracking up at how fucking lost I am right now. So I read some people's reactions online and just their thoughts of things. And I saw some complaints about the ending that I'll talk more about in the spoiler section. But I saw complaints about that and I disagree with them and have evidence to back up my
Oh
claims.
shit, do they have evidence? I bet
Um,
they don't.
No, losers.
This is an evidence-based movie review podcast.
Yeah. Anybody, did you have any other thoughts, Jeff?
None that can't wait until we get into the spoiler zone, I don't think.
Well, let's talk about some content warnings.
Let's
Let's do
talk
it.
about some content warnings. Stalking.
Yep.
That's
Gaslighting,
there's
kind
a bit
of.
there, yeah. Bit
There's
of
some, yeah.
gaslighting. Bit
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
serial killer.
Paranoia.
Oh yeah, there's some serial killerying.
It's only a theme of the movie.
I don't know.
Yeah. Isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very isolation heavy, but it's like that like Rosemary's Baby kind of like urban isolation thing, which is I think very neat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Decapitation.
Mm.
Is that a content that we warn usually?
It do be happening. I mean, it's like one of the. It's one of the only things that happens in this movie.
It is, yeah. There's not a whole lot of actual events in this movie, is the thing.
Yeah. That's all I
Yeah.
can think
Yeah.
of.
One thing I will say, since we're about to get into the spoiler summary, so this is a spoiler. There is a character who's a sex worker, but she is not mistreated in any way because she is a sex worker. Nobody treats her
incidental
weirdly or
to
differently. Yeah, it's
everything,
just where
yeah.
she works.
Mhm.
So I did like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right, here we go. I'm gonna do a spoilery summary
Whoa,
here.
whoa, whoa,
Don't
whoa,
don't
whoa,
you think
whoa,
you're
whoa.
forgetting
Yeah.
Am
something?
I? Oh, hey Emma. Hey
Yeah.
Emma. Was this movie scary?
It's a different kind of scary than like normal horror movie scary. I think the paranoia is very relatable. And it can be unnerving if you've been in similar situations. And I think when the movie does do stuff, it does it very well, and it's unnerving and it can get you. So I'm gonna give this a 3.5 scary rating.
Okay. I gotcha.
Which isn't, it's not
It's not
nothing.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's not nothing.
It's
at
really
all.
more of a
higher than I've given
yeah.
lately.
It's
Yeah.
been a lot of very, very low numbers lately.
Yeah. Normally I'm like 1 or
Yeah.
0.
It's more a creepy movie than
You
like
gave
a
something
scary
actually
movie.
like a pretty high rating recently, but I don't remember which movie it was. Like a shockingly high rating. I have to go to our episode list though.
I did. Yeah, I'm looking at our episode list.
Yeah, I'm like looking to see what I've.
The Babadook.
It might have been the
I think it
Babadook.
was.
It might have been the Babadook.
Well, yeah, because that one was intense. Okay, yeah. All right, let's talk about what happens in this movie for real. American couple Julia and Francis relocate to Bucharest, moving into an apartment with a large picture window. Julia notices a man looming in a window from the building across the street. While Francis works long hours, Julia grows unnerved by the man in the window, who watches her on a daily basis. Julia's fear heightens when she learns of a serial killer dubbed the Spider by local media who is decapitating young women. While walking through the city one day, she senses a man is following her. She manages to flee to a nearby market, but when Francis and Julia visit the market to review the security footage, it proves inconclusive. Julia befriends her neighbor, Irina, and Irina shows Julia a pistol her boyfriend Christian gave her for protection. Later that night, Julia waves at the man in the window, and he waves back. Convinced that it is the same man who followed her, she calls the police. Francis accompanies an offer to the adjacent building to speak with the man. It doesn't say this in the Wikipedia summary, but I think it's important to note.
Yeah.
When Francis comes back, she asks him if it was the same man from the security footage. He does not answer and then says, even if it was, that wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Favorite Francis line in the whole fucking movie.
Also, I feel like it's important to note, we see everything that happens inside the grocery store, and he is very definitely following her. And when we see the security footage, it still looks very definitely like he's following her. But when Francis sees the footage, he says, well, I don't know. Maybe he's staring at the person who's staring at him.
I will side a little more with Francis on that one.
Sure.
Because I can see how, like, you hear something fall on the ground, you go over to look at what it was.
Sure,
you see
sure.
someone staring at you out of the butcher, like, window or whatever. You're like, what the fuck is she doing? I will say, we find out later that he definitely did see the guy from the security footage when he went over to knock on that door, and he did not tell her it was the same person, did not validate her, and then was like, but even if it had been, and I'm not saying it wasn't, but even if it had been,
Yeah.
it's like, Francis, anyway.
It doesn't sit well with the rest of everything that he does. I feel like it's important to mention all of it.
I have one big red flag from Francis early on that I cannot wait to talk about.
Oh, yes.
Okay. One day, Julia follows the man to a strip club where he works as a janitor. Irina, a dancer at the club, spots her. Julia questions Irina about the man, but she knows nothing. That night, Julia hears a commotion in Irina's apartment. Julia convinces the landlady to unlock the apartment, but they find no sign of Irina. Francis believes Julia's fears are imagined and points to the fact that the spider seems to have already been apprehended. The next day, Christian arrives searching for Irina, who never returned home. Then they try to confront the man in his apartment, but no one answers the door. Julia works up the nerve to knock herself, but it's answered by an elderly man. That night, a police officer arrives at their apartment accompanied by the man now identified as Daniel Weber, who accuses Julia of stalking him. The officer chalks the incident up to a misunderstanding. Julia accompanies Francis to a company party and gleans that he has made jokes about her fears to his coworkers. She angrily leaves and boards the subway where she notices Daniel in a near-empty car. When he attempts to explain his voyeurism of her, that he lives an isolated, unexciting life caring for his father, Julia notices what appears to be the outline of a severed head in his shopping bag. She returns home where she begins packing. She's interrupted by music playing from Irina's apartment, where inside she finds Irina's headless corpse before Daniel smothers her with a plastic bag. When Julia regains consciousness, Daniel recounts how he killed Irina and hid with her body when Julia and the landlady entered the apartment. Julia hears Francis enter their apartment next door, but when she attempts to scream, Daniel slashes her throat. Francis calls Julia's cell phone, which he hears ringing inside Irina's apartment. He sees Daniel exiting and begins walking towards Daniel, but Julia suddenly shoots Daniel multiple times with Irina's pistol, killing him. She steps out of Irina's apartment, covered in blood, and stares at Francis. That's that.
Yeah.
Good movie.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you my big red flag from Francis.
Absolutely.
Francis is the only motherfucker in this movie who does not even attempt to help Irina understand Romanian at any point.
Julia, not Irina. Yeah.
Julia. Yes, Julia, sorry.
Yeah,
everyone else is like
gets-
trying to teach her how to communicate.
Yeah, strangers, actually.
From
'Cause
the
it's like
cab driver
the
to
fucking
the landlady
the
to
guy at the
Irina.
coffee shop.
The guy at the coffee
She like
shop.
says something a little bit wrong when she's placing her order, and he just kind of like chuckles and corrects her and tells her that her accent is good. Like, he's supportive, even more supportive than her
Everyone
actual
else.
goddamn husband.
It's like she's learning to
Yeah.
surprise him. He knows. Why isn't he teaching her phrases to use around town?
Yeah.
Literally talking about her behind her back in front of her face.
Yeah,
It's
that
so
Yeah.
well
so
done.
that
It's
yeah,
so well
the
done.
in the summary it kind of glosses over this a little bit, but the reason that she leaves the company party is that while she's standing there with her husband and his coworker and his boss, and they're talking in Romanian because, like, you know, just because nobody gives a shit about her in this situation. Her husband Francis says, like, makes a joke and everybody laughs, and she, like, at this point has picked up enough Romanian that it takes her a minute, but she's able to figure out what he said. And she asks him to clarify that that's what he said. And he, like, gets mad at her for pointing out the fact that he just made a joke at her expense because he's such a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is that? And then as she leaves,
Yeah.
he's just like, I don't know what to do anymore. It's like, well, you've tried nothing, buddy.
He's literally
You've tried
so
being
here's the
fully
thing.
It's like,
absent
it's not
at
that
your job all the
serious.
time and then making it worse when you're home. That's all you've
So
done.
he tried
Like,
my favorite thing that guys do. My ex used to do this all the time. He basically told her that it was a potential for her to be a problem because she was acting crazy, but he didn't mind. That's functionally what he repeats over and over throughout the movie, is that he doesn't believe her. He thinks she's crazy, but he loves her anyway.
yeah.
Like that is the kind of like male manipulator, like male feminist support that we get from Francis through the entire movie. It's really, he's a really well-written scumbag.
Yeah.
It's well done.
And that's
Yeah.
like kind of the thing about this movie, right? Is to fit right into that, into the specific like manner of how he's written as a piece of shit. We've got our creepster, our stalker, who isn't cartoonishly exaggerated. The way that I feel like a stalker written by a man probably is more likely to be, right? This guy, we almost never see him do anything, actually. We see him just kind of like, there's a lot of standing there menacingly, but it's all stuff that like, you know, your horror movie husband could be present for and still write it off, still discount it as just a guy doing stuff. You know, you get the impression
Yeah.
that Francis could be fully present for everything that happens in the movie, and you would still get all the way to the end before he believes her, because he would just look at all this stuff and be like, well, I don't know, he's just kind of walking, he's just at his job, you know, ringing a mop in a sinister manner.
It's one of those
Like-
things where, like, I've experienced this firsthand, and it's really stressful when you know that a guy is just being kind of shitty. You've heard from your other girlfriends that this guy
Yeah,
is
you
shitty.
know that he's a creep. You know that
You
he's
know
a
that
danger.
he's a creep. And then you tell a guy friend, and he's like, "Well, he's never done that to me," or "But he's trying to be better." Or they will even, and this is my favorite one, they will say to your face like, "Oh yeah, he's a piece of shit." But then when they run into him in public, they're still nice to him, and they still go out of their way to talk to him. And it's like, I thought, or they'll still be friends with them on Facebook, or
Yeah.
they'll still like go to events where they know they're going to be there. That is the most frustrating thing in the world, because it's like, you listened to me, you told me you heard me, and then it's literally not that hard to
Right?
do something about it, to just not go to
To
those
actually
places,
give
not
a
be nice
shit,
to that
maybe.
person. It doesn't cost you anything. You see this person once every 3 years, and so your relationship with them isn't that important. If you see them in public, just say, "Oh, hey man," and then like don't go out of your way to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
That is like literally all that I've ever asked of anyone, and sometimes even that's too much.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's super frustrating, and it's absolutely what's going on with her here,
Yeah.
which is why it's nice that obviously Irina supports her,
Right,
even though
yeah.
she openly says she has no reason to believe Julia. She's like, "I've never seen this guy do anything," but she's still like, "I'm here for you if you need me. I'm going
Right.
to make sure that you have a space where you feel safe and you have company if shit's going down."
Mhm.
Girls supporting girls.
Yeah.
I love Irina.
Girls
Well,
supporting
that and
girls.
also fitting right into that. When the men in this movie try to help her out, did you notice this? There's a very distinct pattern.
They make it
just
worse.
impulsively make it worse and then shrug and say, "Well, I tried." And that's it.
Literally.
because
It's
when she
so-
tells Francis about it, he like walks over to the window and he's like, "Which one is it?" And she tells him which
You're
which
like,
window
you know,
it is, and
you
he
know
just
they're
like flips
provoking
him
it.
off immediately. And as he does it, she's like, "Oh no, don't do that," and he just does it anyway, not thinking about the consequences that it'll have for her.
Because
Same thing
immediately
with
all
Christian
he's
later.
thinking about is the consequences for him right now is I can take this guy.
Yeah,
But it's like
well, this has
you're not
nothing to
gonna-
do with you, though. It happens
Yeah.
when you're gone. What are you going to do then? You've made it worse.
Yeah.
And then
You've
Christian
made it
does the same
worse.
thing when he goes and pounds on the door and yells at the guy. And he
It's like,
like,
I've been
it's kind of
careful
implied that he
not-
threatened him, right? Because
Oh,
he
no,
doesn't say what he
100%.
said, but the way that he explains that he told him to leave her alone, it definitely seems like he was just threatening the dude, right? But
Yeah, he was like, if you
Yeah.
fuck with her again, I'll kill you or whatever, which is
Yeah.
like a great way to like let whoever it is know. This is the thing, is like I've had this happen before as well, where I'm uncomfortable in a situation, but I've been very careful to be very chill around this person and not let them know that I hate them, because I know that that would be detrimental to like it's like in a work situation
Oh,
where
God,
doing
yeah.
anything overt would put me in danger because this person knows where I work. So I've been very chill, but then I tell someone else about it and they escalate. They make it known that I know this person's being creepy, and it's like, no. No. I wanted you to be covert like me and give me an out and like be like, "Oh, could you get me something from the back?" as like a code word so I can go hide in the back until they're gone. But instead, you're like, "Hey, leave my employee alone." It's like, "No. Don't do that."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was well done, absolutely, in that way, because it's all of those things are repeated. They are brought up, but then they're repeated ad nauseum, so that you know, like, this is a problem not just with one dude.
Yeah.
It's a problem with just they're just got no
Yeah.
concept of what they're doing.
Live in a different world.
And I think, yeah, similarly, or in this kind of same topic, at the work party where they're all talking in Romanian in front of her, the boss's wife is there, and throughout the entire time she looks extremely uncomfortable and like sympathetic towards her. And I love that touch of just like she gets it and she understands probably why our main girl is so like freaked out, but all of these men are just like joking around at her expense.
At the dinner at the apartment, the coworker's wife is also the only one who translates what they're fucking saying.
Yeah.
Like
Francis
to her, in
doesn't
front of
even,
her.
once again.
Yeah.
Francis lies to her about what they said on the news because he doesn't want to freak her out.
Yeah,
which
because he
pisses me off.
Yeah, the way that he tells her about the stuff that they're saying in the news program when he translates it for her, it definitely seems like he's intentionally holding something back. And then later he just denies knowing that it was the fact that the girl was decapitated. That's definitely what it was, though, right?
Yeah.
It was 100%.
be.
How did she die? Oh, they didn't say.
Yeah, he's got like a face
say
on
that
when
on
he
the
says that
news.
even.
Yeah.
Would-
I think it's also really interesting knowing that the spider killed Irina. And at the beginning of the movie, when Julia is seeing this guy kind of staring through the window, she's probably seeing him stare at Irina's apartment.
Might be.
And then she keeps looking through the window and interacting with it, and I think draws attention
Yeah,
to
kind of
herself
gets
a
his
bit.
attention then. I could see
Yeah,
that.
which is terrifying.
Terrifying.
Absolutely it is, yeah.
Yeah. Also, so there's a lot I want to talk about with this movie.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the end and kind of what I saw people being like disappointed by, where people were talking about how the ending where her neck is cut and she's bleeding a lot, and then the killer watches her die and then starts to leave, and then she's suddenly awake and shoots him, even though she's lost a lot of blood. People were like, that's not realistic, and she would have been dead and all this stuff. But earlier in the movie, when she goes to the cafe and finds like an English article about the murders, and there's like an interview with one of the victims who survived, she mentions that the killer like cut her neck and then just watched her for what felt like hours. But she survived, and she has a scar on her neck in the same place main character is cut. And so that's just like a great bit of foreshadowing about how you can survive that
Also,
cut.
For anyone who's saying that,
and also that she is, it's a quick throwaway line ish, but that she was an
yeah,
actress, and so she was acting and playing dead at the end, and fooled
yeah,
Killer Dude, and then was able to kill him.
yeah, and
I think it's just great. I
it
think it's
is,
great.
yeah, and I want to talk about the flow of that scene in just a minute, but also for anyone who's saying, yeah, that's in the movie though, that's not like true to life that you could survive something like that. I highly suggest that you listen to the Dead and Lovely Horror Movie podcast because one of their hosts, Steven Spratling, actually had that happen to him one time. There was a guy
Holy
like
shit.
robbing his apartment and he slashed his neck with a box cutter in just about the same spot as she gets cut in this movie. And he survived that. He said actually
Wow.
when it happened, he didn't the guy had like, swung it. So he actually in the moment was so distracted trying to stop the guy from robbing him that he didn't realize his neck had gotten cut until he tried to turn his head and couldn't because the muscle had been severed, which sounds like one of the
That's
most
wild.
terrifying
Oh, yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
But like it got infected and stuff afterward, but he was able to get medical attention in a reasonable period of time, so he was okay.
So here's my
That's
problem
great.
with the ending. By the time that like she faked out the death or whatever, I was kind of hoping this is a me thing. I was kind of hoping she was dead because I wanted Francis to have to fucking cope with the fact
Ooh.
that he had
Yeah.
gotten her killed. This
Yeah.
is maybe again because I've been watching more like standard Blumhouse kind of
Oh,
like
sure.
movies, and the good guys usually do just die in those. Or like the protagonists usually end up eating it. There's usually those like hopeless endings, where it's like, and the killer's still out there.
Right,
So
yeah,
I
it's
was
just
kind of
bleak.
hoping specifically because Francis had been disbelieving her through the entire movie.
Right, so dismissive.
I was
yeah.
really hoping that when he made eye contact with Daniel walking out of there, that he was gonna go in there and find her dead, and maybe we'd get like an extended ending of him having to deal with the fact that he didn't believe his wife when she told him all this stuff. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of that is still just heavily, well, I don't think it's like I'm on the fence about this. I think it's still all of that kind of emotion that we could have gotten from that kind of ending is still heavily implied just by the way she looks at him at the end of this movie.
Yeah,
Oh my god, the look
absolutely.
on her face.
Yeah. And I think in specific regards to that, I love a good horror movie where all the main characters
Love
die
that.
and there's that sense of like hopelessness
Oh,
and
yeah.
evil still out there, whatever. Love that shit. But in these specific horror movies where there's a female main character, and specifically in this movie, and I know you're aware of this as a writer and consumer of media and everything, there's a huge issue within Hollywood and movie making in general about fridging women to teach men some kind of lesson.
Yeah.
And I think potentially if this was directed by a man, that would have happened. But I'm glad that the woman survived in this.
So
Um,
specifically, I feel like this is something that has been happening a lot lately, is where the women do get to
Mhm.
win. We saw it in Last Night in Soho and The Invisible Man specifically are two that I can think of off the top of my head.
and
Barbarian, Crimson Peak to a lesser extent. Like I think that while these are like good woman empowering kind of things, in specifically this movie, um I don't say think he gets away with no consequences, but I think that sometimes the character needs to learn that their inaction could get someone killed. You know, specifically in this situation, I think that a lot of real life men need to like, oh, girls can take care of themselves, girls will have a gun or whatever. Like their actions when they do stuff like this could get women killed. Like legitimately. So I think that like it's less of like fridging to teach women a lesson, but more of like in this specific plot could have been something to like drive home that what you think is like trying to spare her feelings or not freak her out or protect your own ego by flipping a guy in a window off or whatever is actually really escalating the danger for women and could actually get them killed. And I think a lot of the time that's something that, because we don't get movies like these directed by women very often, when women are fridged in movies directed by men, it's so that they can have their grief moment and then come back and be like a strong hero. They still don't
Right.
learn that lesson that they got the woman killed. And in this one,
Yeah.
to me, the lesson specifically would be like, look, dude.
And it
Mhm.
really would only work because she's the POV character for the entire length of the movie, right? Because if
Right.
he was the main character and all the same events occurred, it would be like, well, this is stupid and it's terrible. But because it's her the whole time, for it to get all the way to that point and then she fucking dies, it's like, oh, well, this is serious actually, because we've just spent the last hour and a half with her. It's kind of
Right.
like I was talking about almost said the title of the movie. I'm gonna not say the title of the movie actually. It's a dead wife revenge murder movie, you know?
Okay.
But it's the best dead wife murder revenge movie because for the entire front half of the movie, the wife who dies is the main character. The movie's
Yeah.
about her until she dies, and then it's about her husband getting revenge. And I was like, oh, that's actually the best way to do the, murdered wife revenge story, right? Because this way she's an actual person rather than just being a
Okay.
prop for, some guy to be angry about.
Yeah. Send me the message of what that
Yeah,
movie
me
is,
too.
because I don't
I'm
think I know it.
curious.
But Um,
I'm trying to force both of you to watch it actually at some point in the near future, so I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
going to do that.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
going to continue
Okay.
pushing that we cover it sometime, and we'll get to it when we get to it. You'll know it when you
sneaky,
watch
sneaky
it.
sis. Um,
I feel like
I
though,
agree
Yeah.
that that's an important lesson for to show for men in media to learn.
it's about who it's
But I
aimed at,
think
though,
in
right?
the
And this one's kind of aimed more
Yeah.
at women.
in the context of this movie, I think he still does learn that lesson, and we see that where he's in their apartment, kind of calling out to her, and she's not answering.
Yeah, he just
and
found
so
her
he
like
calls her.
half-packed suitcase and everything, and
Yeah, he calls her and hears her phone in the neighbor's apartment.
Yeah.
And then goes to check it and sees this guy creepily coming out, like staring him down, like coldly slipping up his sweater. And I think you see the panicked expression on the guy's face.
yeah, he's figuring
and
it out.
he's just like, yeah. And then gang,
Yeah.
gets shot.
Yeah.
But I think he definitely, in those panicked moments, we see him realizing kind of the seriousness of everything that's been happening. But I understand.
Yeah.
I think there are multiple ways this could have been done well.
More than
think-
one way for a movie to be good, as we all said earlier.
And I think that
Yeah.
I agree. There is that moment where he has that realization. I think that a lot of the time in real life when guys are confronted with that moment of proof that they were wrong, as long as things turn out fine, they'll just absolutely refuse to fucking acknowledge it. You know?
Totally.
As long as you seem fine, they're like, well, it wasn't that bad then.
And that's why she really doesn't seem fine.
Mhm. But, like,
you
she's
know,
alive.
like she
And
looks
that's
at
all
him and
that
she's
it
just
takes.
from the neck down, it's just nothing but blood and guns still in her hand, and she did just fucking kill a guy in a hallway. Like
So
it's pretty clear that like this isn't quite a happy ending still.
Yeah, for sure.
I did
I,
I have a feeling divorce is in there,
I
future.
hope
my
I mean I
favorite
would think so, yeah.
my favorite 2-star review that I read was one line, and it just said, "I hope she shot her husband after."
Ah, yeah. I was gonna say one thing that cracks me up is that Irina and Julia assure each other that they cannot hear what goes on in each other's apartments.
And they
This
definitely
is blatantly
can.
not true. I love them so much.
Yeah,
They can hear each
so
other's
good.
phones ringing through the apartment. And they're like, no,
Yeah.
I can't hear you having
Like,
sex.
what?
It's fine.
Yeah.
And that's
So
the wall
good.
that their bed is right up next to. It's
I-
just like,
I
oh
love
no.
them so much.
I would like to talk about tension.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And paranoia,
Yeah.
which I think this movie does exceptionally well. Like we've discussed earlier or said earlier, this is a very simple, pretty straightforward movie.
Yeah.
Going into it, I had heard like it's very slow burn, and then the last 10 minutes are really intense, which definitely the case. But throughout the movie, I think for one, having this set in a foreign country where she doesn't speak the language is incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all heard, originally this was supposed to be set in New York
I
City.
did see that, and I was like, that wouldn't work. This movie doesn't work
yeah.
if she's in a place where she speaks the language.
No.
Yeah, it was going to be still about kind of like isolation and
Sure,
everything.
yeah.
But I think the fact that she doesn't speak the language goes so much further.
Yeah, and I think
to help.
that's something that would have gotten added when Chloe Okuno picked the script up, right? Because she's the writer, but it is actually based on a pre-existing script.
So the change was made because of COVID.
Aha!
Because they couldn't film in the US due to restrictions, but they could film in Romania.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if that's why so many scenes took place outdoors, just on
Yeah.
very long.
Well, and she's just always alone, like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
huh.
But
That makes the
I
strip
think-
club scene even funnier, honestly. Because the fact that it's a strip club that's just called Museum, and they have like the dancers are all like in these little like windowed boxes in between paintings hung on the walls and stuff like that. It's like
What a
it's,
good
yeah,
gimmick.
it's neat. It's a funny idea for a gimmick strip club, but also like knowing that COVID was a consideration, it's like, oh
pandemic,
no, this is
yeah.
just a COVID strip club, isn't it?
It's
I love
great.
that.
Absolutely. But the way that helps set up the tension of her never really being sure what people are saying, and also people not wholly understanding her. And as someone who's lived in foreign countries where you don't speak the language,
Yeah.
you will hear people talking around you a lot, and you do have that paranoia of like, oh shit, are they talking about me?
Right.
Am I doing something wrong? And then that on top of when she goes to the movie theater, this guy comes and sits directly behind her. She doesn't get like a good look at him. She sees his shoes. And then she leaves because he kind of like repositions in his chair and it freaks her
Yeah.
out. So she leaves and looks back and gets like kind of a silhouette of him, and then goes to the store across the street and is shopping, and then sees this guy and he's got the same shoes. And so throughout the movie you're still like suspension of disbelief-ish
Yeah.
of it could be somebody just wearing similar shoes.
Yeah, and it could be
it
the guy
could
in
be
the window,
somebody
but I
just
don't know that
shopping.
because I only see him as a silhouette, and it could be, yeah.
Yeah. This could be a misdirect of the movie trying to make us think it's this guy, but all along this is just like a normal guy, and like she's not familiar with Romanian culture and she's misinterpreting things. And these sorts of things keep happening. And so all the way you're like half like wholly with her, and you're like, absolutely all this shit is really creepy, but then there's like the part of you that's like, is this movie fucking with me?
Yeah.
Is this all like a misunderstanding? Like, and the way that it plays that tension is so good. And then you get the train scene.
Yeah.
And the train scene is so
I
good.
love the train scene.
For one, so earlier when Julia went to the guy's apartment with Irina's ex-boyfriend, and he was like banging on the door and all this stuff. After that, the guy comes to her apartment with a cop, and the cop is talking for the guy, and the guy is pretending not to understand English, because the cop translates for him. And then on the train, the guy speaks great English.
Yeah.
And he's talking to her, and he's still like, oh, you know, I'm just this really lonely guy. I have a really boring life, so I like to people watch,
Yeah.
which apparently I also learned in Romania is very common. You have a lot of neighbors that will just like people watch. And so having like curtains and kind of blacking out your apartment is a big thing in Romania, so your neighbors don't know what you're doing because people will spy on you.
Right.
It
It seems like something
and
that would
him
just
being like-
happen in densely populated places regardless of where you are, right? Like,
Yeah,
but it is like
but
specifically a Romania thing, huh? Interesting.
apparently. So, this guy's speaking in great English, talking about like his life and everything, and still, he's like, I still just feel uncomfortable about how everything ended. I just feel like you owe me an apology.
Mhm.
And he's doing this the entire time, and she's obviously panicking, freaking out. They're on like a near empty train together. Um, and she looks and sees this bag next to him, and just ever so slightly, it looks like there could be a head in there,
Uh-huh.
and you're not entirely sure. And I kept waiting for some sort of reveal of like, oh, it's not a head, it's like some fruit or something, and it's just
Nothing,
kind of
no.
like there is not a reveal at
No.
all. And so again, you're left in this like not sure like if that was actually a head or like what was going on. And then she gets off the train and he doesn't follow her.
I swear between
Um,
shots they like switch the prop to make it look more like a head in the bag as well.
I would love to
Probably. I
rewatch it
wouldn't
and
be
find out.
surprised. Yeah. But then she goes and she hears like music. She goes home, hears music playing in Irina's apartment, goes over and finds her her headless corpse sitting in a chair, and then she's attacked. But just the way this movie plays with kind of tension and paranoia, even on the audience who's watching the movie, is great. And even on me, who knew it was a straightforward movie, but I was like, this could be straightforward in a way of it's this guy, or it could be straightforward in a way of it's a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I had no idea the entire time until the train scene where he started speaking English. I was like, okay,
Oh, shit,
this guy's fucked.
And I love the way that the killer is played by Bern Gorman, who has been on this podcast before in our Crimson Peak episode. He wasn't here, but he was in the movie, you know.
Creepy dude.
He absolutely fucking kills it as this character. The train scene especially, I love the way that like he comes over and he like, you know, he sits down across from her, and it's like, you know, the train is stopped and she's real scared and stuff, and he starts off by like very calmly and quietly kind of he seems almost like embarrassed about the whole situation a little bit at first, and he's just kind of like, you know, it's probably just an animal on the tracks and it'll take a couple of minutes and they'll clear it up and we'll get moving again. And she's like, why are you following me? And he just goes, I don't control the trains. And he genuinely seems as though he's taken aback by that accusation. But then the longer he talks, his voice starts to shift. And by the time he says that he feels he is owed an apology, he's full on just talking in a scary voice. And every time I watch the scene, I can't figure out when the shift actually happens. He does it gradually enough. That and like just the way he does everything, the way that this dude found a way to wring a mop in a sinister manner, which by the way, actually the mop wringer on that bucket at the strip club, the handle is mounted at like a terrible angle. That thing's got to be really hard to use. Actually, you should put those at a better angle so that when you get to the harder part of the push, you're pushing the handle down, but it's going to where like the handle is vertical at that point. You're just pushing the bucket forward at that point. Terrible mop wringer. So sorry that the janitors at museum have to deal with that every day.
Ridiculous.
But like the way that he does everything in this like weird stiff kind of way until there's like another observer around for him to put up an act for. I love that. I love the way that he talks the whole time, the I don't know, subtleties of his facial expressions and stuff like that. He's always getting shot as this like silhouette, just like towering and imposing, and it's so cool. The combination of the way he's shot and the way he acts it is just so good.
Yeah. Also, he's just a creepy looking dude.
He's got that face that's like he doesn't look weird necessarily, but you look at him and you're like, I'm not sure if I should trust you.
I have to butt in because my main association with this man is all the ship art of him and Charlie Day's character from Pacific Rim.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I just like
Incredible.
what the gay little scientist from Pacific Rim.
They just make robots together.
They just want him kissing in the world. That's all I know about
Yeah.
Bangor.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we get to the final scene that I meant to talk about earlier, he lures her into Irina's apartment. And by the way, did you notice he never enters Julia's apartment?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
closest he gets to it is when he reaches through the doorway to shake her hand in the apology scene. But he lures her into Irina's apartment and gets her with the bag over her head, and then she like kind of wakes up on the floor, and he's standing over her. It's shot through the plastic bag, so like the colors and everything is all like fucked up and it's all clouded, and he is just this terrifying silhouette standing over her. And he explains to her that like he left enough holes in the bag that she'd be able to get air, but if she screams or hyperventilates, she'll pass out. And then he slowly starts to take it off of her, and he's like, Irina screamed, and you don't want to end up like that, that kind of thing. Then he slowly rips the bag and gets it off of her head, and very quietly and softly goes, "Hello." And that is just such a perfect touch to that fucking moment. Oh my god. And then she screams, and he cuts her, and she bleeds on the floor. And I love the way that he, like, follows her into the other room as she crawls, and then when she stops, he lies down on the floor next to her in the same position that
creepy.
she is in to look into her eyes as she dies.
Just like Annihilation.
And he does. It is just like Annihilation.
When you think about it, it's just like Annihilation.
When you think of and really, this movie's an awful lot like Suspiria because there's all that like red and green lighting in the strip club scene. But I love the way that in that scene, I feel like a worse actor under a worse director would have really hammed that up, right? Would have been like acting like more intentionally creepy and been like, weird about it and stuff. But he is just like, I don't know, soft but cold about it. Like it feels like this is something that is very intimate for him. But at the same time, he's really just not showing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like we
Yeah.
don't see we don't see killers getting acted like that all that often. I think it's very cool.
Very creepy.
Yeah.
I think the scene where she gets cut was really well done.
It feels like the cut comes out of nowhere. Surprises me every
Yeah,
time.
it was very fast. Where she hears her husband calling for her in like their apartment, which is right next
Yeah.
door, and he warns her not to scream, and so she screams, and then just he very quickly like slashes her
Yeah,
neck.
just immediately.
And the way her scream turned breathy immediately
Uh-huh.
was really well done.
Yeah.
Um,
She's incredible
and-
in this. Oh my god.
yeah. I mean, the train scene leading to this scene like is just so
Yeah.
good. Obviously the best parts of the movie, but they wouldn't be so good without all of the build up from the rest
Yeah,
of the
you need
movie.
all the accumulated
Um,
tension.
Yeah. But fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. It's just so good.
Yeah. Yeah, throughout I had found myself kind of thinking about like, Rosemary's Baby and other, urban isolation type movies of that nature. And I was trying to
Mhm.
see if I could find anything from Chloe Okuno about what she was thinking of when making this. And it turns out I was fucking right. She was talking about all three of the movements in what's called the Apartment Trilogy, which are all what are they called? Repulsion, The Tenant, and Rosemary's Baby, and not in that order. All regrettably directed by the child rapist Roman Polanski. And she was talking about how specifically the urban isolation elements of those movies was like a huge, huge, huge influence on the way that she made this movie. A lot of people have also compared it to Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window,
Mm-hmm.
which I have not seen because I have not found it in myself to go watch any Hitchcock just yet.
Yeah. It's too old for me.
It might be too old for me. I'm not sure. I have a hard time with a lot of black and white movies sometimes. Like, it's not a deal breaker
Yeah.
for me, but, like, I find them more difficult, 60s movies as well. Just, once you get back further than the 70s, it starts to lose me a little bit.
Yeah. I remember what I was gonna say.
Oh, good.
So way back in the day when this podcast first
A
started,
long time ago.
a long time ago, a large component of what I would rate movies on for scary ratings was if it made me jump.
Right.
And this movie is so quiet throughout and just very, it's like paranoia, all of these things, that the 2 times that it does do jump scares, both of them got me very badly. The first one being, she's at the train station, she hears a man cough, but nobody else is on the platform. So she's like trying to like maneuver to see around like pillars and things to see if somebody's there. And then the train goes fucking rushing by, and it's really loud.
And that's the first.
And I was not expecting it at all.
And that being the first jump scare of the movie, that's the train station scene immediately before the train scene that we were just talking about, and that leads right into that final kill scene. That's how far into the movie you get before the first jump scare.
Yeah. And the second one being, like, she goes to Irina's apartment, hearing, like, the music playing, and circles around to the bedroom and sees her headless corpse sitting in a chair. And then a bag is, like, shoved over her head. Also very scary. For one, because it's very sudden. And for two, just, like, it was scary in that, like, sudden thing that I was kind of expecting it, but just like sudden thing, but also just the terror of like, oh fuck, it happened to her.
Yeah.
Of just this entire movie, you're not wanting it to happen to her, and then it finally does, and you're like, shit. And it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
I thoroughly loved this movie. Had a great time with it.
Yeah, I for one am really looking forward to whatever Chloe Okuno ends up doing next, because I actually also, after watching this, found out that she directed the Storm Drain segment in VHS 94, Hail Ratma, which was one of my favorites in that one.
I'll like it when I watch it.
I expect that you're likely to. It I mean, as previously mentioned, though, it doesn't have Mabel, so...
Yeah,
99 will always have something that 94 doesn't.
I will always miss Mabel wherever she's not.
Every movie ever.
Every movie
except
ever.
Except for that one segment in VHS 99.
Yeah. Yeah.
We gotta start covering the other VHS movies so we can get into like the good ones.
Right. It doesn't really take that long. It literally
it's a sharp uptick from 1 to 2, and then we do get VHS viral after that, but then
but it's like not as bad as 1. The bar is on the floor, but
we can
it's poorly
executed. We can stop watching Halloween and Friday the 13th and the other one, and start watching Child's Play
and Scream and VHS
and Scream.
I mean,
I would enjoy that so much more.
Well, but if we're gonna reformat Slashtober like that, then that would mean that we start watching at least the Friday the 13th movies throughout the rest of the year. Are you prepared to do that? Because I'm not about to just stop covering Friday the 13th movies.
The Slashtober ones that I'm ready to keep are the Nightmares, because I want to see more Nightmare movies.
But I want more Jason.
I know you do.
That's my boy.
I want that. I want Scream and I want Child's Play, but I can accept keeping Friday. I'm so glad that we're not doing any of the other Halloweens. I'm so glad that we all kind of collectively decided, like, that's as much Halloween as we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are about to just hit Halloween ends, so we do need to replace it with something. I thought the general consensus was we were doing that with Child's Play, right? But
Child's Play or Scream were both actually seriously talked about. So.
Yeah. Audience, you can find out what we pick this slash.
Yeah, and you can try to influence us between now and then. If you're in the Discord, if you just tell us stuff you want to hear on the podcast, we'll take that shit seriously, actually.
We love Scream so much, and we want to hear you guys talk about Scream.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did finally watch Scream 3 recently. Boy, that shit sucked.
If you put $200 in an unmarked envelope and put it underneath like your nearest bus
and once
station,
again, that's a minimum, of course. You can and should give more.
A minimum. You can do more, but put it under like the bench. We will find it, and we'll take your opinions into consideration. So I had one thing I wanted to share.
Okay.
There's a fun fact that I thought was fun that I wanted to share. Micah Monroe,
Yeah.
the actress who plays Julia in this movie,
She's so good.
for one, did a great job.
Absolutely, my God. So much of the
She's
movie
also
is just...
fucking gorgeous.
Well, I mean, obviously, I thought that went without saying.
Huge aesthetic crush on her. But she was also the lead in It Follows.
She was, yeah. Saw that.
And in this movie, Julia goes to see Charade, 1963, at the cinema. This is the same movie that Jay, also played by Micah Monroe, goes to see with Greg at the beginning of It Follows.
I did see that, but I still haven't watched It Follows. Yeah, that's a
I-
fun
You
little
haven't?
reference,
I
isn't it?
really think that I haven't seen it. I know two things about It Follows. One is that it has a
Nina, you haven't seen
haven't.
it? What the
yeah,
fuck?
I haven't seen It Follows. I know the whole plot.
I thought you both had seen it.
Nah.
That's so wild.
Every now and then, it's the nature of this podcast that every now and then somebody mentions It Follows, and then I mention that I still haven't seen it, and then somebody is surprised by the fact that I still haven't seen it. This is actually, I think, the first I'm hearing of the fact that Nina hasn't seen it, though. Or I just didn't remember because I'm a
Can
piece
I-
of shit. I don't know.
Can I tell you guys something? A secret about me
Yeah.
that we'll say while Noah's not here, and that he might not.
There's an awful
remember.
lot of movies that you haven't seen, but you're familiar with the plot because you read the synopsis on Wikipedia.
Yeah, we've talked about that. But have we ever talked about how I'll just straight up lie about whether or not I've seen them, and then I'll forget about whether or not I've lied, and I'll just be honest later and say I haven't?
Oh my god, really?
That's hilarious.
Wow.
And I think that's what happened.
Wow, this is a betrayal on levels that almost
I
have
gotta-
never been seen, but there was that one time that we covered Willy's Wonderland and got all the way through the episode before finding out that Emma just straight up didn't watch the movie.
Okay, so here's another thing.
And I think that was on par with this, probably.
So I was talking to my coworker. I had a boss forever ago who I had forgotten part of what had happened, but I might have mentioned before on the podcast when I got fired from one of my jobs at a dentist's office. The office manager told me that she thought I needed to, after I expressed to her the great distress that I had been feeling at this job, she told me that I needed to be on medication. Which was really
well,
super
naturally,
fucking rough.
yeah.
Well, what I
As
had
we all know,
forgotten-
mental illness is when you hate your job.
What I had
so-
forgotten was I had been meticulously setting up coping mechanisms for my ADHD, specifically my memory issues at work, which included sticky notes with all of the times and what for I needed to call different people, like call this person by this date because of this. On the bottom of my monitor where no patient could see them, I came into work one day, she had taken all of my sticky notes and put them in a binder for organization purposes. I never
No.
looked at those things again. They were gone.
Well, yeah,
I-
when are you going to open a binder?
Right? So
This is obvious shit.
so she was like actively sabotaging me and dismantling my coping mechanisms, and then told me I need to be on meds. I was telling my new coworker at my current job about this, and I was like, and then immediately like 10 minutes later, I walked out of her room and I was like, what was I doing? And she's like, what do you mean, what were you doing? And I'm like, I had a plan, what was it? And then I like took 2 more steps and I was like, oh, I know what it was. And I like went and did the thing. And I was like, maybe she was right. Maybe I do need to be on meds. My coworker was like, well, do you find it affects your day-to-day life? And I was like, oh yes, so
Wow.
much. And that all circles back around to, yeah, I don't know what I've said to you guys about which movie
Fair enough,
I've
fair enough,
watched
fair enough.
and which I haven't.
That's okay.
Because sometimes in conversation, I figure it's probably easier to just pretend that I've seen the movie than to pull the whole, like, I read the Wikipedia synopsis, I watched a Your Movie Sucks, like, fucking,
Right.
video about it.
Yeah.
For all
I watched
intents
the
and
Dead Meat Kill Count on it, so I've basically seen it. Like, yeah.
literally, for all intents and
Yeah,
purposes, I've seen It Follows. But I've never
Mhm.
watched the movie.
I've done none of those things. I know something about the basic premise of it and have consumed nothing having anything to do with it because I have been planning on watching it for checks watch 10 years now.
Has it been
9
10?
actually, but
Oh, God.
I think it came out in like 2015.
14, I think.
Okay.
I might be wrong. I don't know. In
Yeah.
any case, I've been planning on watching it for most of that time, but I just still just haven't yet.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, then my fun fact doesn't mean anything to you.
Well, I got a different fun fact about Micah Monroe, actually. She is also a professional kite surfer. She's been
Really?
doing it since before she was an actress, actually. Apparently
That's
it's a thing that
awesome.
her dad did, and she, like, ever since she was a kid was like begging him to teach her how to do it. And he made her wait until he like felt she was old enough for it because of how dangerous it is. But she, like,
Yeah.
apparently at some point, like, took second place in a really high profile competition for it and everything, and like it's still a thing that she does, which I think that's
Mhm.
rad as hell.
That is rad as
Yeah.
hell.
Super
There
rad
are
as hell.
2 female characters in this movie. 3 if you count the cashier that gives her the the cigarettes and then looks actively annoyed when she walks away.
4 if you count the old lady.
Oh, yeah,
neighbor.
5 if you count
count
the
the
boss's
landlady.
wife.
But if we're talking about like named female characters, there are actually
People who
just the
matter
2.
for the plot. Yeah, it's really just the 2.
Yeah.
They're both so pretty. They're both so
They are.
pretty.
They are. Yeah. I thought for a while, I was like, is Irina in on it? And she's like partnered with the spider.
I was gonna be so mad.
Oh, that would be
And
so fucked up. Oh my
like,
god, yeah.
she gets people to like let down their guard.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I thought that might be a thing. But then she disappeared pretty early in the movie, and I was like, guess
Nope,
that's not
guess
it.
not.
I would have been so upset. I have a thing where it's like I would rather my favorite character in a horror movie die than have their character like personality assassinated. I would rather they get actually
Yeah.
assassinated than have their character assassinated.
That's valid. Very valid.
Character assassination? No, character assassination.
That's how I felt about Spring in the biggest way. I
Oh
would
my
have rather
God, yes.
anything else
Jesus
have happened than
Christ.
the way that it actually ended.
Oh, she just ends up with him? God.
Come on, babe.
Yeah.
You can and have done so
Actually,
much better.
though, okay, on the subject of the lack of women in this movie, though, I feel like that's one of those really pointed things about it, though, right?
Oh, yeah,
because
no,
it's kind of
100%.
showing, it's kind of a story of like how quickly a woman's life can fall apart when she just doesn't have
Oh,
other women to be supporting her because the men in her life are so consistently unhelpful.
so
And
let
it's
me.
clear that that's not like an environmental thing because her husband is like that, the same way as the strangers are all like that.
So this is something I can relate to with Julia specifically. Is I
There
did
is no
move,
aspect of this movie that you don't relate to, is there?
unfortunately. So I
Everything
did.
that happens, you're just like, I have experienced this firsthand, actually.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that a lot of people, um, there's so many clunky ways to say it, but people who grew up as women, I guess, is the best
Right.
way for me to put
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Have
It's a lot of
experienced-
relatable experiences, right?
Yeah, they've experienced
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff, if not almost exactly this way, then very similarly. Now, if you are a smart person who was socialized as a woman, then you did not experience the moved across the country for a man part of it, but I have never claimed to be smart. So I did relate to that specific aspect of this, is moving to an unfamiliar
Sure.
place where your spouse has connections and a job, but you kind of are just there. And
Yeah.
that only was the truth for me for a couple months after I moved here. And what I can say is Noah made a really good effort to find me support and encourage me to
Mm.
make connections.
Yeah.
And then when I started making friends, he would encourage me to do that as well. He wouldn't
Yeah.
just invite me out to stuffy like gatherings. He introduced me to Carly and Amanda pretty early on and encouraged me to hang out with them without him. Like that's it's hard to manage that because like it's going to be, moving is rough no matter what. Going to college was rough. If I hadn't met my roommate who like literally forced me to go to things, I would not have like made it through college with any friends.
Mhm.
But like, and I that's a me thing. But like moving here, Noah did everything he could. Francis does jack fucking shit. He does
He's
not
not even
like
there.
he's
He's
the
just
one who's
at work,
going out
morning,
into the
noon, and
world.
night.
And
Yeah.
he's not, I thought I heard of this cool, cute place that you could go to. Or like, hey, like my boss's wife said that something's going on this weekend. You should go. Like,
Uh-huh.
I heard about this concert or this movie or anything. He literally just
Yeah.
goes to work and comes back and lies to her about serial killers.
We
And
never
then,
even get a scene where he like asks her how her day was or something as
no, when
simple as
they're
that.
at,
We don't get the
Mhm.
impression that he even gives a shit what she's doing that whole
no,
time.
no, he's
Dude's
never
just
like,
gone.
what did you do today? Yeah, no, it's insane.
But he's so stressed about work.
He's working so
Everybody, have
hard. And I
you
understand.
have you considered
Have you
what
considered
he
how hard it
feels?
is to do marketing for a job?
Oh my god, yeah, they got him on Frosty Cakes. You know how hard that shit
And some
is?
some like
Gosh.
marketing to women specifically. Ew.
Yeah, what
Can
was
you
that? What is
imagine?
that?
Yeah.
He just needs to suck up to his
It's
boss
like
better.
office supplies for women.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
was
I
what
love it.
it
His
was.
coworker
Yeah.
is such an asshole too. Like we get very little of that guy, but
Absolutely.
god damn, I hate
He
him.
is so I think it's really
Yeah.
great how willing the guys are to back each other, like that specific guy is to back his shitty friend's shitty antics up.
Uh-huh.
Christian, I will say, for all that he's violent,
He gave his
as
girlfriend a gun.
he gave his girlfriend a gun. He does back Julia up. He does go over and like even as he dips out on her, like when you see, I think this is something with movies which shall are struck and shall go unnamed. I think that some things you expect to see caricatures of men when you hear about like the
Mm.
crazy ex or like the ex-boyfriend who's coming over and pounding on
Yeah.
the door. You
Yeah.
expect him to be just an
Mhm.
angry, crazy person. And then it turns out that this movie gives the men pretty much the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time, you know, or portrays them
Mhm.
in ways where it's like you can kind of understand where they're coming from in Francis's position.
Yeah, it's
It's
complicated at least.
the way that he reacts to Julia is not necessarily just point blank awful cartoonishness. It's
Mm.
sometimes you're like, yeah, I understand where Francis is coming from on this one, but I can
Sure.
only understand where he's coming from so many times before I'm like, okay, you're just being like willfully ignorant to your
Yeah, he
your wife's
crosses a
stress at
line
this
in
point.
pretty much
Yeah.
every interaction.
But
Yeah.
like it takes a minute, and that's what makes it like realistic and
Yeah.
better as a movie is that like Christian pounds on doors and yells a lot, but he also isn't like dismissive to Julia. He's like, "Yeah, I'll go over
Yeah.
with you. Yeah, I'll knock
Yeah.
on this door
Yeah.
Well, and like
until I can't
he puts on
anymore."
his tough voice for knocking on doors and threatening people and stuff, but when he's talking to her, he softens up an awful lot.
And he
Yeah.
seems like
Absolutely.
there's no reason for him to be like, again, this is the same thing with Francis. There's no reason for him to be as worried about Irina as Julia is. He has
Mm.
like plenty of excuses as a man to not think that Irina's in any danger because she does this all the time, and why would this be any different, you know?
Right.
Like, and it's one of those delicate balances where Julia doesn't know Irina that well. So not only like yes, she does have these reasons to be concerned that are valid, but she also doesn't have information that Christian has. So is it really like a callousness thing on his end, or is it really an ignorance thing on his end? Or is it genuinely that like he is valid in not finding it that big of a deal?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the relationships are all as complicated as people's relationships always are.
Which
Yeah.
is nice. It's nice to see complicated relationships. That's something I will say about The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man is good. I don't think it's as nuanced as this movie.
Nah.
Which is
Yeah.
what leads to this movie feeling like more straightforward and like boring, but like it's more like generous to basically every character as far as like
Yeah.
giving them the benefit of the doubt, which is more realistic to real life. No one, almost nobody is genuinely malicious,
Yeah.
especially in a scenario like this where it's a bunch of people who are neighbors who are living together, you know?
Yeah, everybody's just trying to have their lives.
Right. So I really liked that that's how things were portrayed.
Yeah. Also, I like that like neighbor drama it's a presence in the movie, but it's not like a big thing. You know, you get a couple of scenes of the old woman with the cat and stuff, but it's not like the movie spends a ton of time on unnecessary neighbor drama, which I feel like other movies doing this kind of thing have a tendency toward. You know, there would be like a couple across the hall who's always fighting or something like that. It kind of seems like a common fixture in these sorts of things. And we don't get that here. Everyone's just kind of trying to stay away from each other the way that you do in a building like that.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody have anything else to say?
I've got like 2 things.
Okay, go for it.
Actually, it might even just be the one. There's just like there's a handful of just really cool shots that I would like to draw a little attention to. One is real early on, one of the first times that we see the silhouette in the window. Actually, the way that like kind of bit of that scene ends, she's kind of like watching, and we get this shot of her, but she's being shot from like outside her window, and it's dark inside her apartment, so we're seeing the reflections kind of superimposed over her face, and we see the lit up window with the silhouette in it, and it's kind of like over her. And then Francis comes home and he turns the light on, and immediately all the reflections go away. We're just seeing into the apartment now. I love that. I love that set of shots. I thought that was really, really cool. Also, there's this one shot that hits early on and kind of gets mirrored later on that I thought was so cool. When they first get there, the like overhead light in their living room doesn't work, so it needs to get fixed. And there's the one scene where Julia is like, you know, she's gone and she comes home and arrives at her apartment to find like the door open. And as she walks in, it does this kind of like, you know, panning shot as it comes toward the door. And you get this sort of, you know, just rotating slow reveal where there's this guy standing imposingly in the doorway. And then the landlady walks out from behind the door and says something, and they both just walk out, and it's like a, you know, just a casual, you know, they were there to fix the light, and it's just like a normal interaction that scares Julia a little bit. But then later on, when the cop shows up with the killer to, you know, do the apology handshake misunderstanding thing, it does the same pan toward the door where it's like, you know, the door is mostly open. Francis is on this side. You can see about half of the cop's body. And then as the camera pans over toward it, it goes past the door, and you see the killer standing there behind the cop. And it's shot the same way, but it's from the other side of the doorway. And I thought that was just a really neat little set of mirroring shots. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I totally forgot about the scene of her going home when the technician like was in her house to like fix the light.
It's easy to forget
really
it because
creepy.
of the way that it doesn't really have a lasting impact on the rest of the movie, right? But it does just play into all the little weirdnesses that bother her so much about not having any of her normals to her existence anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love this movie. God.
It's great. Big fan. What are we watching next
1408 was the plan.
1408.
1408.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out what the hell's up with that.
Me too.
Yeah, I know nothing about
it. I have very specifically learned nothing.
Yep, I know nothing. I think here we go again. Noah might have.
Here we are going ignorantly into a movie that's been out for 15 years.
No, Noah told me, I think, several details about the plot that I just have no recollection of. So I don't know shit. Maybe I know the whole thing, and as I watch it, it'll all come back to me.
Maybe you've seen it before, and you were lying about not having seen it. We'll never
maybe
know.
I fucking have. You don't know.
Who knows?
The street goes both ways, maybe.
But there's only one way to find out in the future, and that's to follow the podcast on Tumblr at Casual Horror Pod. And is that the right place on Tumblr?
Yeah, I think it's Casual Horror Pod. Also,
I still don't follow the podcast Tumblr myself yet. I should get on that.
Subscribe to us on YouTube or whatever, because we upload it all there. Twitter is fucked. I'll just put that bluntly.
Yeah, Twitter's... I'm not even gonna keep listing my Twitter at this point.
Yeah.
I'm not using it really.
I still am, but I don't know how long after I'm done with this book release I will continue to use Twitter.
Yeah.
It depends.
Tough to tell how worth it'll be.
You mean X?
I do not.
No, it's still Twitter.
But yeah, on that note, you can find me on Twitter at Nina Wolverina. I intend to stay there until it's genuinely unusable, but it's getting really close. You can also find me on Instagram at Nina Wolverina. That's probably where I'm secondarily most active, or on Tumblr at Nina Wolverina with a 3, where the E usually would be. I do art and stuff. And I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm on Hive. I'm on basically anywhere that has popped up. I have claimed my username, and if one of them turns out to be viable, I'll start posting there. So follow me at those places. I do art, and I wrote 2 books. By the time that you're hearing this, the second book will be out. So you can find that book, The Forgotten Lyric, on Amazon. Yeah, you can read it out of order. If you haven't read the first one, don't worry about it. Read this one
But you
instead.
should
I'm
read
more
it, though.
I'm more at this particular moment in time. I'm more excited about book 2, so read that one.
Okay. Looking forward to that.
I'm so
I'm
hyped.
hyped too. But yeah, that's me. What about the others?
You can find me on Letterboxd at The Fakest Fan, or on Tumblr at What Is It You Pray For.
And I'm Emma, also known as Emma Panana. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Emma Panana. I'm also writing a TTRPG called All the Witches. You can find information about that at allthewitches_ on Twitter.com. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, everybody. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.